Israel believed the commandments of God weren't just given for the children of Israel to live in their country by, but if Israel would have done this right, all nations would have sent their ambassadors to the children of Israel saying, why do you have a society like none on the earth? And do you know what Israel would have told them? Because we worship and serve our God and we obey his commandments. And just like nations today will try to throw away their old ways and accept American democracy. Let's take a country like Japan, for instance. Y'all know Japan was one of the last major countries on earth to have an emperor who was like the sun god on earth, like Pharaoh was.
I didn't know that. That I didn't know.
Oh!
That I did not know.
Well, let me share this with you, young king. Go and do research on what really ended World War II in the Pacific. We ain't going back 1,000 years. We're going back to World War II. Bro, you heard of the attack on Pearl Harbor, I'm sure.
Oh yeah, I heard that.
And the fighter pilot, the Japanese fighting unit, and their style of attack is called kamikaze. You ever heard of that?
Yeah, heard of that.
Okay. Do you know what kamikaze is, homie? Kamikaze is this. We will defeat the American imperialists who are a threat to our country and our king, our emperor, to the point that we will take an oath and we will get in planes on the other side of the Pacific Ocean and we will fly all night across the Pacific to the other side and hit Hawaii, which is the islands before you hit the west coast of America where California sits and Washington State and Alaska. And we not going back home. We gonna die over here. So we coming. And when we see the United States naval bases, we're going to sink as many of their ships and subs as possible. And then when our planes run out of fuel and guns, we will crash our planes into their cities and into their ships and kill as many Americans as possible. That's called kamikaze. And that's, you know why they were willing to die like that? Because they were doing it for the sun god, Emperor Hirohito, who was the living incarnation of the sun on earth. He was basically the Japanese pharaoh, huh? Mm. And the Japanese were so gone in this belief and culture that America, fighting a nation smaller than itself, took the most drastic measures seen in human history in warfare and dropped 2 atomic weapons on the cities of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. And you know what that did? The last man on earth, known as the sun god. The sun god. Bro, it was penalty of death to look straight at him as a Japanese citizen.
Wow. Penalty of death.
Now, the reason I'm bringing this up is because we underestimate how people look at things and how culture is. And when the emperor of Japan, Hirohito, surrendered after the atomic bombs were dropped, you supposed to be the sun god? Well, we're about to drop a weapon that with the power of the sun on you and show your people you're not God. America becomes God. And guess what? General George MacArthur sat on that Navy ship while they brought the Emperor of Japan onto the naval ship, and he signed the surrender papers right on the American Navy ship in the Pacific Ocean. And from that time, Japan left its theocratic system and became made in the image of what, brother? The American democratic capitalist system. And that's why Japan today is a democracy and it lives economically by capitalism. It was made in the image of America. It adopted America's laws and ways. Why did I go through that long spiel? Because America is so powerful that by war and technology, it has convinced other nations to get rid of their systems and make their countries and their laws in the image of American democracy and law. The children of Israel, if they would have kept the commandments, Moses said, if you obey this, what it will create societally, this will be your wisdom and understanding in the sight of all the nations, man, who will say there is no people as wise and understanding as this nation. So when the countries come to you and want to know, how do you have this kind of society? Do you know what that leads to, brother? Those nations will adopt some of your laws and ways in order to try to produce what? The same results.
Right. Yeah.
So no one can tell me that the commandments of God are done away with. How is it that Jesus in Matthew 5 said he didn't come to do that, but everywhere you go, Christians want to argue that's exactly what he did? Because it's a misunderstanding of what Colossians 2 is teaching versus what Jesus said in Matthew 5. Paul is not my master teacher. Peter, none of them. They are our big brothers who we follow as they follow who? Christ. When Jesus said, do not think I am come to destroy the law of the prophets, I believe Jesus, man.
All right.